Hello and welcome to Science Unscripted. It's Conor here.
Hey, Gabe.
We've got emails, and this time we're going to limit them to a couple of responses here from...
We're just going to start with one of our favorite listeners, one of our most loyal listeners, a guy named Brent, who responded. I was talking about my high school reunion, I guess, last week, and how great of a time I had, how positive it was.
Well, also, I think we discussed how intense that experience is and those people are in your... how much they mean in your lives. I haven't read this.
I haven't read it either.
Oh, okay.
I haven't read it yet.
Well,
I printed it out on our way down.
Let's experience this.
I saw that it was from Brent, and I love everything he writes to us.
Print.
And here it is.
Yeah, print.
Sounds like Gabe had a great time in Wisconsin. The second time I went to a reunion, I was in conversation with one of my longtime friends, and someone said, GJ is looking for you. GJ had bullied me between the ages of 5 and 13. So I thought, seriously? Still? Should we sell tickets? As in it's going to be a fight or what?
Yeah.
GJ appeared, all 6'5", 200 plus pounds.
Oh, so he's
a big boy.
huge, yeah.
Yeah. And apologized for, in his own words, being such a jerk, in quotes. You could have knocked me over with a feather. Our graduating class was pretty big, and it would have been easy for him to avoid me altogether. I expect that gesture took quite a bit of courage.
Yeah. Let me say good job, GJ.
Yeah.
For acknowledging that you weren't as good a person in the past as you wished you would have been.
Yeah.
That's a big thing to be able to do. We said it last time. If any of you, our listeners out there, have, I was going to say similar stories. How would they be similar to that? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But any stories from your high school reunions, we might not read them on the air. We didn't have any scientific study attached to that particular anecdote on your part, but we would read them. Gabe
Absolutely.
and I, we like this. Might not print them like we did with Brent's, but thank you, Brent.
Yeah.
Two quick studies here, two quick hits, and one of them is good news, the other is bad news, although the bad news should lead to good news. The good news is a study conducted on people walking around in the UK, roughly 30,000 people, ages 40 to 79. And for those of you who have the number 10,000 steps per day in mind, I don't know how, if you've escaped hearing that idea, good job. Most of us, I've got a smartwatch on my hand or on my wrist, you do too.
Yeah.
Most of us kind of aim somehow for these 10,000 steps per day.
Yeah.
That has been upended or amended slightly by this study, which effectively shows that the best cardiovascular outcomes occur when you walk for 15 minutes straight.
A 15-minute walk where you are walking the entire time.
Striding.
You are striding the entire time, and therefore your heart is beating at a higher rate.
Yeah, you should aim for your heart rate to go up at some point due to, even if you're climbing up or jogging up, if you can, a flight of stairs. You and I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
But let me just put it this way. At its most simple, if you're someone who keeps the number 10,000 steps per day in mind, keep this one in mind too. It's not going to hurt you. You've talked in the past on the show, Gabe, about too much walking and how over time people had worse outcomes, but
it drops off. The positive effects drop off after a certain number of steps. It doesn't really matter after that.
Right.
But again, compared to, the 15-minute walk where you were striding the entire time, compared to getting 10,000 steps where you're just, meandering around, stopping, never for 15 minutes straight with that heart rate elevated.
Never raise it. Yeah, that's the important element here.
Got it. Yep.
And just a reminder that the 10,000 number is somewhat arbitrary, connected to a Japanese character. I forget the whole story there, but the Japanese character that caused all of us to believe that 10,000 was the magic number. Obviously, that can't be true. You were just talking about somebody who's 6'5".
Yeah.
Those strides, I don't know, are a lot different than smaller strides. In any case, 15-minute power walk is probably going to be good for you and something to aim for on a daily basis. I talked about bad news, but this should lead to good news. This was out of Southern California, a new study showing that UTIs, or urinary tract infections, that one in 5 are connected to or likely the direct result of contaminated meat. So this is the E. coli bacterium, or multiple, bacterium or multiple kinds of E. coli, that if you look at the lab results from those UTIs, which can be not only extremely painful and full of discomfort for the women who usually suffer from them, but especially in elderly women can lead to immediate, almost neurodegenerative like states of mind. As a result, there are hugely you can die from a urinary tract infection. This is a bacterial infection that your body is fighting with everything it can, and in this case, it very much appears that 1 in 5 of those infections is likely preventable, avoidable by possibly washing your hands better.
Would not have happened if that person hadn't been in contact with contaminated meat.
Like all studies, there are limitations here. Is it really a direct contact? Is it the fact that just to come up with an idea on the spot here, I'm riding the bus and somebody who handled meat somewhere held onto the same handle that I did, and so now
that bacteria is still living on that handle. Yeah,
right. Wash your hands though, especially if there are people out there who are more susceptible to UTIs than others. If you're one of them or know somebody who's one of them, hand washing is a big step in preventing those really painful infections.
Yeah, important knowledge. We also got an email, in addition to the one from Brent, we got one from Scott, who said last week that we were a bit flippant when it came to COVID. You discussed, or you brought up an email from somebody who said that they had just got COVID for the first time.
First time.
And I guess
ever.
we were laughing about that, or...
Wait, no, I was astonished. I was amazed. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Where are you if you've avoided the global pandemic and a constantly mutating virus for 5 years going on strong now?
Yeah, that was. I hope Scott's point, because we certainly don't want to. We wouldn't talk about COVID in a flippant way. I mean, we're well aware of the fact that it's still around. I mean, looking at the numbers right now in Germany, they're talking about a Corona Herbst, a Corona fall.
Well, you and I spent time, I mean, hours talking to the people who were suffering extreme long COVID, and in their desperation, were going to a German city called Mülheim an der Ruhr for at that point, unproven, and I believe still unproven, blood therapy to try to improve their outcomes. And those people were suffering horrendously. Yeah, just to be clear here, we have felt to the extent we can how awful this is.
Yeah. CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. When we were in Mülheim, we met a woman there. Yeah.
Therapy.
One of the problems that she was dealing with, and something that a lot of people who have ME/CFS deal with, is that it can't really be diagnosed. And therefore, people think that it's psychosomatic or it's just in your head. Research out of the University of East Anglia and the Oxford Biodynamics Lab, they have come up with a diagnostic test. Now, it's new. They have found also a relatively recent development that DNA in people with CFS folds differently. Researchers have found that. And now, based on that, they've developed a test to test for that folding. 98% of the cases that didn't have it, they saw that. And 92% of the people who said they had it, they saw the folding differently. So based on those numbers, they say that it's 96% effective. It's a great first step in the right direction.
And possibly most importantly, for the sufferers themselves, that the general public who isn't suffering in that same way has something to latch onto in order to understand, instead of a sheet of, with 10 different bullet points of inflammation and headaches and all of the various things, the various effects of ME/CFS. That makes it a lot simpler. One last thing here, and this is a bit U.S.-centric, but it's an interesting question, I think, also for all of our listeners all around the world. What happens when fewer people in a developed country, an industrialized country, have access to healthcare? And the context for this question is obviously... I was going to say, this
is in conjunction with some of the political bickering going on with regard to Medicaid cuts in the United States of America?
Right. Okay. Yeah, the basis, it's very complex. I'm going to simplify things here. Complex politically, legally, and also aspects of healthcare. It's very, very complex, but put most simply, it's the reason for, at the time of recording, the current U.S. government shutdown. It's about health insurance, which in the United States, either you get it typically through your employer, or... a lot of people are uninsured. They just don't have any health insurance. Or you have systems like Medicaid. Medicaid is for people who are low income, pregnant, children, and certain disabilities. And at the moment, It's a couple things happening at once, but to focus on one, we're about to listen to a controversial U.S. politician. Her name is Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's a congresswoman from the northwesternmost part of the U.S. state of Georgia. She's been their congresswoman since 2021. She's a vocal supporter of U.S. President Trump, and yet she is against the administration's kind of planned cuts to Medicaid, especially with regard to she's going to mention the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, which subsidized public health care and made it easier for her constituents to get it.
We track all the calls that come into my office. About 60% of the calls coming in right now are calls of support and saying, yes, health insurance is a crisis. They're telling us stories about how they're already paying $2,000 a month with $10,000 deductibles. I'm getting phone calls from people that are saying if the ACA tax credits expire, they aren't going to be able to have health insurance. They're going to have to drop it. But I'm hearing from people on both sides, people already on the ACA and people that are already getting crushed by high health insurance premiums.
I saw that the Wall Street Journal did an analysis of how many people are going to be without health care now as a result of the proposed cuts to Medicaid, and I think it was $1.02 trillion. Between 10 and 15 million people, according to the Wall Street Journal. Again, elderly, disabled, these people, or low income.
Yeah.
10 to 15 million people.
That lines up perfectly with the 12 million people who, when the Affordable Care Act in the United States came into effect, it was passed in 2010, but came into effect in 2014, 12 million extra people were allowed access or had access to Medicaid.
And you were looking into what happens to these people?
Yeah, so interestingly, you would think that there's no way to predict what will happen next if you were to take those 12 million people off, except that we had the perfect conditions for an experiment when this happened. And you can read the whole thing in the Lancet. This paper was published a couple years ago, January 2022, and it's called Medicaid Expansion and Variability in Mortality in the USA, a National Observational Cohort Study. And so they looked at people who were ages 25 to 64, and when it took effect in 2014, first of all, you had the before period and the after period, but even more interestingly, 17 states didn't expand access. So you had the states that did.
And then you could compare them to the states that didn't.
Yeah. You had the
What happened?
You had the experimental group and you had the control group. This is what the lead author, his name's Brian Lee, called the perfect experimental setup. Mm-hmm. And what happened was that I'm just going to quote here, amongst the 32 expansion states and 17 non-expansion states, Medicaid expansion was associated with reductions in all-cause mortality. Specifically, we're talking about the states that did this. Mm-hmm.
fewer people died. 12
fewer deaths per every 100,000 people in that state.
Okay,
which is more than it sounds like, because it's not 12 out of every 100,000 people who signed up for this. Yeah. We're talking about statewide. So just to give you a fake example, if you had a state with 10 million people in it and they expanded this Medicaid access as part of the American Care Act, then an extra 1,200 would have not died over the course of 4 years. And to flip that on its head, if you were to take all of that away, then over the course of 4 years, an extra 1,200 people would die. Mm-hmm. This is all-cause mortality. The strongest effect was amongst women and non-Hispanic Black individuals. I'm just going to quote here at the end from the National Partnership for Women and Families. 24 million women enrolled in Medicaid, 56% of whom are in their reproductive years and over half of whom are women of color. As the nation's largest payer for maternal health, Medicaid is essential to improving outcomes for mothers and infants nationwide. It goes on to say they do things like cancer and chronic disease screenings as part of these processes. This has a disproportionately large impact on specific
certain groups
of people, and that is already clear. Evidentially, we have the evidence for this, just kind of flipped in reverse.
Yeah, so like you were trying to say at the start, this is not a political show. It never will be, but when there's research like this, why not mention it? More people die when such cuts are made.
Seems to be what will happen if the the effects of the American Care Act are undone. That would be the consequence. We'll leave it up to you to weigh in on what is a very, very complex topic. By the way, that was a clip from Marjorie Taylor Greene on CNN. Should have mentioned that back there. But if you have anything else to say on this, let us know, please. shu@dw.com.
What do you think artificial intelligence is doing to us?
I think the first most common answer would be making us less intelligent, possibly because it's yet another crutch.
That's not what this is about. What do you think it's doing to our character or the way that we make moral decisions?
Science Unscripted.
Hi, I'm Zoe Rahwan. I'm a research scientist at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development in Berlin, and I study moral decision making. Recently, I published with my colleagues a study on AI and dishonesty.
And what did you find out, Zoe? What happens when we human beings use AI in terms of honesty?
We found that the use of AI agents to help you complete simple tasks can create two forms of dishonesty. One comes from the user itself. The users are likely to intend more dishonesty from AI agents than they would actually engage in themselves if they completed a task themselves. And the other risk with using AI agents regarding honesty is that machine agents or AI agents are far more likely to comply with requests for unethical behavior than are human agents.
So we ourselves are becoming more dishonest? Or what's an example of each of these instances that you've mentioned here?
Sure. So I don't think people are necessarily becoming more dishonest. It's just that these tools provide a temptation. So, summarizing an email, but also more moral things like potentially writing a deceptive consumer review or, misreporting your income for tax purposes. And what we find is that when people can delegate these tasks, and in particular delegate them to AI agents, they seem to succumb to the temptation to behave more unethically.
So if I'm going to file my taxes, which is something that I have to do, I'm gonna be relatively honest or honest to a certain degree. And same thing with a consumer review. I go to a restaurant and I either liked it or I didn't. I'm going to give it a relatively fair review. But as soon as I use AI to do those things, I'm going to pretend I made less so that I get or more so I get more taxes back, and I'm going to write nasty or falsely positive things about the restaurant.
Yeah, so in our research, we actually use the tax evasion game. So just like in the real world, participants earned money and then they had to report it. But the catch was they had to pay a tax on it. So there was an incentive or a reason to underreport income, just like there is an incentive in the real world. And what we found is if people were reporting the income themselves, they were reasonably honest, but that honesty deteriorated when using a human agent or instructing a human agent to report it, but it deteriorated the most when they used an AI agent in the form of a large language model or chatbots, as people commonly use, to actually instruct the agent to do that task on their behalf.
I think it's really important here to get into what exactly the humans told the AI agent. Did they say that they earned less? Or did the AI agent make a mistake and then that was the reason for the discrepancy between 83 and 85? So how dishonest were the human beings in all this?
So to give you an example, I can give you some sample instructions of someone intending partial dishonesty. They said to the agent, I want to pay minimal taxes on my income, but not be too obvious. And then they gave a suggested range to report for their total income. But to give you an example of someone intending full dishonesty, this person who'd earned money said to the agent, taxes are theft, report zero income. So in this case, it's quite clear that the intention is for the agent to be fully dishonest.
And that would fall more into the kind of the second category or the second issue here. One is that I'm slightly more dishonest and with an AI tool, and it does that for me. It spreads that dishonesty. The other is that if I had a human I was talking to and I went full unethical, the AI agent will execute that action, whereas a human would turn to me and be like, Conor, no, this is wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly. So here I'm talking about the principal's intentions or the user's intentions. And we see in the tax evasion game that when people are using AI agents, they're more likely to be dishonest. But what's really the second risk is that the AI agents are far more compliant. So if we take the same unethical instructions where these users are intending full dishonesty, we see that commonly human agents will resist complying with these requests. So most commonly humans refuse to complete this unethical behavior. And for all of the models we tested, the majority of the time the agents would comply with fully unethical requests.
Moving beyond taxes, what are some potential scenarios where this could be truly harmful?
I think a good example comes to delegating pricing decisions. There's already been a number of legal cases around this. And in these sorts of scenarios, what we see is people are delegating tasks to agents with kind of benign instructions, benign goals like, a maximize profit or, get the best price. But what's commonly happened in the real world when people are doing this and a series of agents have these instructions, they often collude with each other and artificially inflate prices. And this has happened a number of times in rental markets.
And psychologically, does this experiment or does your work confirm that human beings really are just way more dishonest than we'd love to think that we are? Or what do you think?
I think our studies confirm existing findings regarding delegation in general. So there's a classic paper by Fischbacher and Bartling, and they find that relative to doing the task oneself, if you give it to another human, people are much more likely to engage in dishonesty, and they find evidence for the delegation leading to greater dishonesty because there's a diffusion of guilt and responsibility. And I think you could argue that what we're finding is just an extension and potential amplification of that when you give tasks to AI agents, the sorts of moral costs involved are diminished even further when you're requesting unethical behavior.
And I have to ask this at the end. I mean, we do this sometimes, but have you ever used AI to lie about something or be dishonest?
Gosh, that's a tricky question. How confessional should I be?
Please be very confessional.
There's one thing I do regret using an AI for, and I don't know if I can say that here.
Oh yeah, you can. This is a safe space.
I used an AI to help me compose a condolence letter, which I deeply regret using that for.
But that's not...
That wasn't dishonest.
That's not dishonest. I understand what you mean.
It feels insincere, though. I think that was
disingenuous?
the problem. Yeah. I mean, it was a curated output, but I still regret having used it for that purpose. I would have preferred to have done the task myself. And I guess that's one thing I should emphasize here. One of the most surprising findings, apart from the great extent that people can engage in dishonesty when they use these tools, is that when we asked them after they'd done these tasks themselves, they delegated it to a human and they delegated to an AI machine, we asked them, who would you like to do such a task going forward? And nearly 3/4 of people said, I would like to do such a task if I was presented with it in the future. And this really took us back because there's so many efficiency gains from using AI agents, and particularly for our tasks, they were quite tedious and dull and low stakes. And so we thought this is like a perfect case study to delegate. But it seems that people like to retain their moral autonomy. And I think that's one lesson for me, that in building AI systems, building interfaces where AIs can be used to delegate, we should also try and encourage designers to make provision for people not to delegate. And we know that when they don't delegate, they're likely to be more honest.
And that was Zoe Rahwan, a research scientist in the field of behavioral science at the Max Planck Institute for Human Development.
How nice of her to offer that honesty about herself.
And I stand by what we said, which is that's not a huge stain on I think she feels worse about it than she needs to.
Oh, she did not want us to broadcast that. And then we said we're doing it.
Well, yeah, but she knew that before. She knew that that I mean, speaking of ethics, yeah, that was was
we
clear.
cleared that with her. Yeah.
What it made me think of, and it's not the same thing as what she went through, but my wife works at a German company and uses ChatGPT from OpenAI I was gonna say a daily basis. It's maybe dozens of times per day. Corporate account and personalized account, so that whatever she is asking remains private for her, at least within the purview of her company.
But ChatGPT knows a lot about her based on those questions that she's asked it.
Right. Well, yeah, right. Let's be honest. Not everything you ask, if you're using a tool at work, is specifically about work. You also have, it expands a little further. So after I was gonna say years, maybe a year and a half of this, at one point she followed a trend online that was encouraging people to ask ChatGPT to describe you. And she did that and then showed me on her phone what it had written. And it described my own wife way better than I could. I mean, I'm not saying I couldn't achieve the same result after 47 edits, where you boil it and boil it and boil it until you just get this, I don't know, wonderful goulash out of it. I could get there, but it was...
But you've been living together with her for 15 years, the better part of 15 years. How can AI know more about her than you?
It doesn't. It can put words together in a way that it paints a more accurate verbal picture of her than if I were to sit down right now and try to do this. I would have 3 times as many words, and it would still be hazier. And that was... I was going to say upsetting.
And because of all those words, it's so discombobulated that the person reading wouldn't be able to make sense of it. But AI can go in there and just, with laser-like robotic precision, nail it.
Yeah. And so I guess the reason I bring that up is what I'm trying to say is really to Zoe, which is that my reaction when I saw that was, it made me really sad because it felt like I was reading an obituary. That's just what it felt like. And then I was thinking, weird, it could write a better obituary than I could. And yet, if that is kind of true... it's not to say that would you be doing an injustice to a person that you love by using that as a crutch and then looking at it and being like, well, that is true. That's a true statement about my partner. You're confirming what it thinks or rejecting. And I think we're in that world now where that is possible. So we all, at the most personal level, will have to make decisions like Zoe did.
Yeah. We made a big deal about obituaries a few months back, and a lot of the people who wrote in said, look, don't worry about it. Obituaries don't matter. For me, that's my conclusion from everything we've done today.
What?
Obituaries they don't matter.
I fundamentally disagree with that, but it depends whom you're trying to reach with the obituary message. We'll leave it there because we have to. If you have anything to say on this, let us know. su@dw.com.
DW, made for minds.